Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the panel discussion. This is Sara Emilia Bernat. I'm a sociologist, co-founder to Fashion Forward, and I am very lucky to be surrounded by these powerhouse women who are tackling different areas of fashion. 2020 had been a very strange and very challenging year, but this surrounded by these ladies is one of the best part of it, as well as having received all these amazing questions from the audience. And because we are a little bit strapped with time, I advise to dive right into it. We have one question that tackles this idea of what is the future of luxury after COVID-19? Will luxury fashion ever be the same? So it would be really great if we would go around, if you could reintroduce yourself in one line for those who are just joining into the panel. Alison, why don't we start with you?
Great, sure. Hi, I'm Alison Bringé. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at LaunchMetrics. At LaunchMetrics, we give brands tools and data to help them create inspiring, impactful, and measurable experiences. So for our customers, China has been a huge inspiration in what could be or what could happen post-pandemic. Obviously, they were the quickest to rebound. And I think that if anything, we've learned is that there is a consumer appetite when the world will open back up. So I do think there is a place for luxury. I think one thing, though, that has come out of this that's been quite apparent is that consumers now are, supporting those brands that they feel like align with their own values and interests. So those purchases are going to happen, but they're going to happen with brands that they feel like clearly align, that were there for them during the pandemic, that really resonated with them. So for brands to be successful, it's going to be key to make that connection moving forward, more than just selling product, really, bringing the customer into your brand story.
Interesting, very interesting. What about you, Thomai?
Yes, I think that the desire for luxury never goes away, and that has to do with being human, really. Luxury is the most universal of concepts. If you ask anybody anywhere in the world, they all have an idea about luxury. So thinking about people who are participating in the markets, I think COVID has been a great opportunity for all of us to reflect about our personal lives and our priorities. And this goes hand in hand with what Alison said. We're going to return to the markets for luxury, going after brands that not only were very humane and humanistic during this pandemic, but they were authentic. And they continued doing creative work that brings out new product. In other words, they're not trying to cheat us out of our money. On the contrary, they're trying to add value to our lives post-pandemic. So I'm very optimistic, actually, about the luxury market in the imminent future.
I completely agree with you. I think luxury is a very reflective concept of how humanity is forming and evolving, and we need to move towards a more responsible approach. And that, I think, brings us to Orsola.
So I'm Orsola de Castro, and I'm the co-founder and creative director at Fashion Revolution, which is a global movement. We have a presence in over 90 countries, including in Hungary, so please check out Fashion Revolution Hungary. And we call for a fair, clean, and sustainable fashion industry. We believe that in an industry that conserves and restores the environment and that values people over profit and growth. And that, I think, it's luxury, because let's face it, luxury as we know it right now is not luxuriously made. The people who make our luxury products aren't necessarily better paid for their skills, and the materials that the luxury sector uses aren't necessarily more sustainable or less toxic. So we need transparency. And for me, the future of luxury, and very definitely what COVID has shown us, is that luxury is small. Luxury is lots of tiny emerging brands that are coming up with a totally different collection as well as a totally different system, that are giving their blood, sweat, and tears towards experimenting with different materials and being mindful and respectful of the supply chain, even if it's a mini one, but that they are going to create. There is no luxury without transparency, for sure, because if we don't know who makes our luxury products and out of what materials, we cannot believe it really is luxury.
Very true, very true. Rebecca, you're working with independent brands directly. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Rebecca. I'm the founder and CEO of Lone Design Club. We are a digital fashion platform that uses physical and digital retail. And as Sarah said, we support and promote independent, sustainable businesses. Yeah, I think there's a lot of points have been touched on. I totally agree. This idea of authenticity, genuine humans that are behind these brands. I couldn't agree more with Orsola. I completely, this is why we exist, to put these small brands to the forefront. And I do agree. I think luxury is going to be about having these special, incredible pieces in the future approach, because they're upcycled items or they're crafted using very innovative, sustainable materials. It's going to be a completely new approach to the way we consume, or is where I hope anyway. And I think this idea of consciousness, conscious consumerism has to be the driver and is at the forefront of this, is the customers voting with where they choose to buy. I think luxury itself, if we look at the big corporates, the luxury players, there's a lot of innovation and reinventing they need to do. There's a lot of change. We're already seeing it on the high streets, Topshop, Arcadia's demise. And there's going to be a huge shift over the next 6 months to a year, for sure. And I think luxury itself is going to go through a massive change as people really start to change their value and vote with their money and consider what they're purchasing.
Absolutely. Talking of luxury fashion, Thomai, you have just released a groundbreaking new book on brands, material, culture, and business. What are the brand challenges that brought you to write this book?
Yes, this is actually very related to the discussion and exactly what Rebecca just said. What I've been observing over the years was a lack of ability to position a brand correctly in the market. And often I saw a lot of new talent coming to market, but then as soon as the financial investors would start backing them, pushing for a very quick expansion and very quick growth, and the brands just losing their compass, in essence, of how they started, how they had positioned themselves, and where they were going. So that was one reason that made me reconsider the field and to create something that would be useful for these emerging luxury brands who had to compete in an oversaturated market where it's already very difficult to make one's voice heard. But also brands that, because of financial backers, moved into giving consumers all the power in deciding what the product is going to be, when in fact a luxury designer has the responsibility to tell the consumer what the product should be. And again, going back to what Orsola said, because as a young fashion designer who wants to create luxury, I should be able to know all the things about transparency, authenticity, supply chain, and how to make this world a better world. And so these were the things that I had seen were not going well in the market. And I hope that my framework is going to help fashion designers think how they want to position, but also to teach them that if they really have aspirations to be very powerful, competitive forces in the market, they have to take their time, because luxury does take time. And what we have seen is this incoherence between how authentically the brand should be growing and at what kind of timeline, and how much financial people are pushing some brands to grow and basically robbing them of their DNA, of their true essence.
Absolutely. Just one quick follow-up question on that. What would you recommend for brands today to find relevance in current culture and also to maintain that relevance?
Yeah, I think that it has to start with a real purpose. And the purpose is not linked to any demographic. And that's why I brought the example of that ideal consumer in my presentation. The designer needs to connect with a segment of consumers who have a common goal in life. And so purpose is what should drive the fashion designer in deciding what other elements of culture need to be activated. That's number one. And number two, I really recommend moving away from fashion as an insular field where we look at what other fashion designers have made and studying really deeply different fields. For example, the medical field, why not? Space travel, why not? And if you learn a lot about these other fields, then you become a better designer. So no more mood boards, no more, what do you want to do today? No, what do you want people to achieve in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and have these customers in mind as you design product.
Love that expansion of perspective. Sorry, Rebecca, go ahead.
I think that's incredible and it's so true. And I would add to that and just say, especially for brands emerging now, the importance of getting in front of that end user is absolutely key. The amount of waste, overproduction, because of, yes, inspiration and vision is wonderful and powerful, but there has to be an end result. We don't want things to go to landfill. We don't want to overproduce. We don't need to produce so much. But to do that, you have to understand not only your supply chain and how you're going to achieve it, but you have to understand the end customer. And you have to be there. And I think it's challenging for small brands sometimes because it is a bit intimidating being in front of those real customers and having the truth or having, those real questions asked. But I think it's absolutely crucial. And anyone wanting to build a business, that product, that idea has to go through rigorous customer feedback and testing before you embark on creating, because it has to be a slower fashion approach, to get this right.
Well, that absolutely. And also, when we just look at consumers, for example, 2020 has brought so much change in the whole landscape and different aspects of consumer psychology and behavior. Alison, can you tell us a little bit more about consumers and overall industry shifts that have taken place throughout the last 9 months?
Yeah, of course. I think what you guys were talking about speaks exactly to the customer changing, right? I said this before, they want to be aligned. It was already trend happening before the pandemic, but we saw that they are looking for brands that, share common values and interests as they do. For brands that, are all of a sudden becoming sustainable brands, like they're actually making sure and they're demanding that these brands aren't just greenwashing them, but they're legitimately invested in this cause initiative and they have these sustainable practices, or that they're, making ethically made fashion, or even things to like diversity. All of these different principles are coming to the forefront of our industry right now. And so the customer is becoming more and more demanding. And it's, as Rebecca said, like they're putting their money where their mouth is. And that's really exciting too, this kind of democratization we're seeing, in our industry. I think it's funny, while we were all waiting to come online, we were talking about how there is this acceptance in our industry of things being less polished. Obviously, we're all from home. Eventually, you'll probably hear my newborn baby screaming in the background. But I think also that is opening up that conversation around transparency. Like, even though it is unpolished, even though we're working from home, et cetera, it does force brands, obviously, to not have such a refined message. I mean, even in how they're communicating, how they're doing marketing, everything is a bit more homegrown. And I think one of the points that we saw when we were looking at the data of, you know, how customers and brands and this conversation has changed is that, you know, over the last few years, brands have been using different voices to tell their story, whether it was the media, whether it was different partners, whether it was influencers or celebrities. And during the pandemic, they realized, you know, I can't really send influencers to promote my products. It's not what people want to hear or see. So I need to have that conversation with my customer. And then they're saying, oh shit, or excuse my language, like, what is this conversation? What's this dialogue? Like, I haven't talked to my customer directly in a really long time. And when I do, I usually try to sell them something. So I think, you know, the shift with the consumer, with the brands is really, you know, what do we stand for? And what types of brands are you looking to engage in? And I think we're going to see a lot of more kind of personal relationships being developed. Brands are going to retake that. Influencer marketing, of course, is still going to be huge. People love word of mouth marketing, but I do think you're going to see brands kind of investing more in content, investing more in telling that brand story, and creating that relationship. So yeah, exciting times ahead.
Absolutely. I think like you're so spot on with this idea that we need to be more human and we need to think what that really means. Rebecca, in your experience, what are the soft skills that emerging brand facilitators need to have in order to acquire and succeed in this collaborative pop-up model that you have outlined? What is it that they need to have in order to connect with people in that framework? Talking of human brands.
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. And I think it also goes to the brand itself. You know, it's very, you know, building a brand is very personal, and it's very specific, and it's very important that where you put your brand and the outlets and how you sell it completely aligns to your message and your story and your vision. So I would start with that, and I think it's really important that brands themselves are aligning with the right platforms or sales figures, stockists, and really understanding where they fit. Facilitators themselves are great. There's a huge surge at the moment of online marketplaces, and you know, this idea, I'm reading it all the time, that marketplaces are the future department stores, which is very interesting. So very, very early how that pans out, but you know, essentially, it's not. And ensuring the brand side and the facilitator side, what is the right curation, what is the right product mix, the right brand mix, what is the message that needs to be told, and just as was mentioned earlier, identifying that small pool of customers that you really want to communicate and speak to, because you're not speaking to everybody. And I think it's really important to focus very deep and niche on how we're targeting and how we're communicating with who essentially we want to speak to. But I do think this question sits both across brand and facilitator, especially because the facilitator side is still so new. It's very still untried, untested. It's very scrappy in the world of retail at the moment. There's, you know, you've got a peer here, you've got short-term lettings platforms, but there hasn't yet been a fully the message trying to be conveyed and build.
Uh-oh, are we losing you?
Oh.
Sorry, we just lost your last 5 seconds.
Oh, I think essentially that kind of summed up saying, I think it's more on the brand side. Really understanding, building from that, who you're trying to target, what is the end customer, and the message that you're trying to tell, and building the package around that. And the pop-up store itself and the rest of it is very much, it can be, that's, you know, there is no rocket science to how to approach that. But the messaging, the marketing, the communication, the brand products and merchandising is absolutely key.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're kind of back to this conversation of what authenticity means and what honesty means. And I think with that, that's a natural segue into what does it mean to be ethical in today's marketplace where so many brands are claiming to be ethical. And Ursula, um, I have a next question for you because I'm super curious. So what would you suggest to consumers and also for brands to show and to ask, what do we, it's very difficult to navigate as a consumer in a marketplace today where everybody is claiming to be ethical. What is the one thing that you would suggest to consumers to look out for, and what is the one thing that you would suggest for brands to make sure to tackle and communicate?
Well, first of all, it's never one thing, is it? You know, it's always the case of, you know, we tend to sensationalize news and everything, you know, this is the thing that you can do, and it's never one thing. And that's the whole point about fashion. It's individual. So some people, some citizens, we don't use the word consumers so much at Fashion Revolution because, you know, from the Latin consumere, to consume means to wear out, to wear until death. So really we use citizens, but each and every one of us will be different. You know, some of us will get into this conversation because we believe in animal welfare. Others will be not at all interested in fashion, but really interested in human rights and want to, you know, stamp their foot on that. Others will be upcyclist, others will be shopping secondhand, and others will have to make the best with, you know, their local whatever. So it's about finding your entry journey. I say always, you know, navigate Google with your gut instinct and find a starting point. At the end of the day, when you are researching to find something that you want to buy online, you will look for the length of the skirt or the color of the t-shirt, or, you know, there's time involved in finding the right piece for your size. Well, look for the right piece for your principles. So look about what it's made of, look about who made it. And it's a different set of information. And for citizens, it'll take a little bit of time to become more aware. But at the same time, in an age of internet, there are so many ways that you can really gather that information. There are apps that measure transparency. There are apps that will help you sell or buy secondhand. So, you know, really there is now a sufficient panorama whereby there is no excuse to abstain yourself from the conversation. What it is that we keep on speaking to each other, and really what we need to do is to bring this message to our next door neighbors, to the people on the other side of the road, because potentially they don't yet masticate this conversation as eloquently or articulately as many of us do. For brands, there is only one thing to do, and that is stop exploiting people and stop exploiting resources. And at the end of the day, when we look at the mainstream, we know that only a handful of brands, or, you know, however many, 20 brands, control this huge segment of the market, 97% or something. I'm not to be trusted on statistics, but in a nutshell. And at the end of the day, we need to see a shift from these gigantic beasts who exploit, and make no mistake, this industry was designed to exploit from its very conception. From the Industrial Revolution onwards, this industry was designed to exploit people and to exploit nature. So, you know, it's a massive cultural shift that we need to do. But fashion brands, as far as I'm aware, work for us. It's not the other way around. So they have an obligation to provide us with fashion that is made in dignity by people who are rightfully and fairly paid and fairly treated, allowed to unionize, and that, you know, made of materials that don't exploit our nature and ultimately poison communities. I mean, it's never ending. But brands need to focus on the fact that for too long, for way too long, their system has enriched them and impoverished everybody else, impoverished our culture, because a student or a young person today wouldn't recognize a good hem if it hit them on the face or if it was well made. They've poisoned our rivers, our oceans, and enough is enough. And this recognition needs an analysis of conscience and a change of system. It's difficult, but it's urgent, and it's proof that it needs to happen.
Absolutely. And I think during COVID, we are returning to this idea, what does it mean to be sustainable on so many levels? What does it mean to be sustainable on the retail level, on the storytelling level? And one thing as a last question that sort of stuck with me, in one of your interviews, Orsola, you said that conferences rarely bring up revolutionary new topics with sustainability. They tend to go deeper, but not expanding it. What are questions and topics that we overlook and that we should be tackling a little bit more?
Our own mistakes. We go to these conferences and we pat each other's back for things that we said 5 years ago and still haven't actioned. Let's look at what we've done wrong before we can claim that we're doing anything right.
Let's do that. Thank you so much to all of you. Have a really nice rest of the day. And it was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.